Good morning. Hi, guys. Let's jump into our New England colonies lesson, okay? Yesterday we started talking about just a brief overview of those 13 colonies, and we split them up into three kind of regions: the New England colonies, the middle colonies, and the southern colonies. Today we're going to focus on the New England colonies. We're going to talk about some vocabulary terms and what brought people here, and then some important people. The New England colonies, it's going to be these ones that you see in green. It consisted of New Jersey, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Remember, the New England colonies are known for their coastal regions, the abundant fish, whales, and trees, okay? And also, please remember that farming was difficult in this area due to rocky coastal soil. All right, let's get into some vocabulary. First, we have the Great Migration. This is a period when a large amount of people migrated from England to the New World, to the New England region, especially for religious reasons. Religion at this point in Europe was kind of crazy. Nobody trusted the Catholic Church. The King of England had decided not to support the Catholic Church anymore because they weren't doing what he told them to, granting him a divorce. So he formed his own church with the Church of England. The settlers weren't very happy by this because the English weren't very happy because the Church of England was just as corrupt as the Catholic Church at this time. This was all kind of part of the Reformation, which happened in the 16th century. It's a religious movement where conflict in that Catholic Church resulted in people splitting off from the Catholic Church and developing different types of Christianity, okay? England broke off from the Roman Catholic Church during the 1500s, okay? It wasn't for always the best of reasons. The King of England truly didn't like that the Catholic Church wasn't doing what he asked, okay? King Henry VIII is his name. He's the one that had all those wives. He developed a new Christian church called the Church of England. Everyone in England was then required to belong to that church, okay, which caused a lot of issues. Then we have some people called the separatists, okay? These were residents of England who wanted to free themselves from that Church of England. People wanted to split from the Church of England because it was becoming too much like the Catholic Church. They were both corrupt, okay? They were kind of doing the exact opposite of what they were supposed to. Next, we have Pilgrims. This is a group of separatists that were eventually led by William Bradford, who we'll talk about. Bradford, he got permission to settle in Virginia. He declared that they would live by themselves under that general government of Virginia. Okay. They came over on the Mayflower and they signed something called the Mayflower Compact. Sorry. This was the plan of government written by the Pilgrims who sailed aboard the Mayflower. It promised that the Pilgrims government would make just and equal laws for the general good of the colony. So they truly believed that they were going to be fair and make laws that were fair. Next, we have the Puritans. This was a group of people who wanted to purify the Church of England and kind of make it, return it to its glory, kind of. They sailed from England in 1630 to search for religious freedom because they didn't believe that the church could be saved at that point. Many of them were jailed since they were part of an illegal sect, or that's a group of people with religious beliefs that differed from the norm. These Puritans did have very strict rules, and everyone in the colony had to follow them. However, not everyone in the colony agreed to those rules, which really kept them in conflict. Finally, we have dissenters. These are just people whose views differ from their leaders, okay? All right, let's talk about 6 or 7 colonists who were very important to New England. William Bradford, obviously, he became the leader of the Pilgrims. Some things to know about him: he was orphaned at an early age and raised by an uncle. He was very ill and in his youth, and he sought comfort in the Bible. By the time he was 18, he had joined a group of separatists. He didn't believe in the Church of England, so he fled England and went to Amsterdam to escape religious persecution. At 19, the group then went to Holland, where they stayed for 11 years until they eventually left for the New World. He was on that Mayflower. He signed the Mayflower Compact when it landed in Plymouth. However, a lot of people don't know this. As soon as the Pilgrims did land on Plymouth, they got very sick. They were starving. They didn't know how to survive. Within 5 months, half of them were dead, including their first leader, John Carver. After Carver died, Bradford succeeded him. He became the leader, and he served in that position until about 5 years before his death. He wrote the only piece of writing that was written by a Mayflower passenger that detailed what happened in Plymouth, and it's called Of Plymouth Plantation. Next, we have Squanto. Squanto was also called Tisquantum. He was captured by Thomas Hunt and taken to Spain to be sold as a slave, but he was eventually saved by some local monks. They taught him Christianity and English, and he was eventually freed. He returned home to North America in 1619. But he found that his entire tribe and family had died of smallpox. He made his new home with the neighboring Wampanoag tribe. Plymouth colony had started to fail, so Squanto really helped them become an essential part of the community. Because of his fluency in English, the colony made Squanto an interpreter as well. The Wampanoag people were being oppressed by another local tribe. So eventually they signed a treaty with the Pilgrims, and Squanto helped them sign that. The tribe then gave the Pilgrims 12,000 acres of tribal land, and they taught them how to harvest. So at their next harvest, they all brought a feast to share with the Pilgrims, and that is considered the first Thanksgiving. In 1622, the leader of the Wampanoag discovered that Squanto was planning to seize power from him. And so he began to discredit him to the colonists. He was like kind of talking crap about him to the colonists, like, oh, he's not a good guy. The leader then of that tribe planned to execute Squanto, but Squanto got sick and died in the meantime. Another Native American that we need to talk about is Samoset. He was a leader in the Maine area, and he befriended the settlers in Plymouth as well. The first Native American, he was the first person to make contact with the Pilgrims, the first Native American to make contact with the Pilgrims. His famous first words were supposedly, "Welcome, welcome, Englishmen." He was an acting mediator between the natives and the settlers. Okay, so he, just like Squanto, kind of helped translate between and mediate. He signed the first property sale transaction between the natives and the English colonists supporting the idea. The Native Americans were the original owners of the land, but then they gave, during one of his earliest contacts with Pilgrims, Samoset introduced Squanto to the Plymouth colony as well. Next, we have John Winthrop. He was very interested in leading Massachusetts Bay Colony. He wanted the Puritans to start their own colony in New England. So he sent a small group of settlers to prepare that area in 1628. He assumed the leadership role of that Massachusetts Bay Colony. Okay, the last 19 years of his life, he lived in New England and was chosen governor of Massachusetts 12 times and sat on the colony council. He organized towns, and his big thing was that he wanted to make sure every single one had a church. The colonists loved and respected him even after his death at the age of 61. Next, we have Roger Williams. Roger Williams was a Puritan, but believed in the freedom of worship. In 1630, he left England and went to Boston with his wife, okay, in 1631. He preached a message at odds with strict Puritans. So while he was a Puritan, he didn't believe in those strict rules that they had to follow. So the Puritans, they banished him, okay? He fled the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he bought land from a Native American tribe to establish a colony that he named Providence, okay, which is still a town today. He published a book called A Key into the Languages of America in London, and that made people believe that he was the leading authority in Native Americans. He governed that colony of Providence from 1654 to 1658, but then he died in Providence around 1683. Next, we have John Wheelwright. He became a minister in England, but he was silenced due to his conformist religious beliefs. He didn't just agree with the church, okay, all the time, and he didn't agree with the Puritan rules. He took his family and he joined those Puritan friends in Massachusetts, but eventually he was involved in controversy surrounding his sister-in-law, Anne Hutchison. She was very problematic because she was outspoken and she earned disapproval from religious leaders. And so both of their families were banished from Massachusetts. So those families decided to set sail up the coast of Portsmouth and travel inland to the falls of the Squamscott River. In 1639, he and his friends founded a constitutional Republican government in a community called Exeter in New Hampshire. By 1643, Exeter had become part of Massachusetts Bay Colony, which he was banished from, so he had to move again. How horrible is that? He creates a colony, then it becomes part of Massachusetts Colony, and he must leave again. He petitioned Massachusetts Bay Colony to pardon him and let him back in, and they granted it, okay? And so he was able to return to New England in 1662, and he served as a pastor until his death in 1679. Now let's talk about his controversial sister-in-law, Anne Hutchison. Anne was the very outspoken daughter of an English minister. This was not the norm for the times. Women normally did not speak out like Anne did. She was very well versed in the Bible and the teachings of John Cotton. She held small meetings at her house to discuss different religious matters. Her honestly, guys, her outspokenness and her willing to kind of stand up for herself was a nuisance to the men who governed the colony. They thought she was a woman and she didn't have the right to do that. She also claimed that her God communicated with her directly. She was able to interpret the Bible on her own. And again, that made men very mad. So eventually her and her family were brought to general court and including her brother-in-law, John Wheelwright, okay, and they were banished. Her husband died, okay, during this time, and she moved to Long Island Sound, where she and all but one of her children was killed by Native Americans, sadly. And finally, we have Thomas Hooker. He was a preacher and a lecturer in England, but he was forced to retire because his beliefs weren't commonly accepted. He settled in Newtown, which is present-day Cambridge. He disagreed with the pastor over his views on voting giving voting rights only to freemen or men admitted to the Puritan church. So he didn't believe that was fair, that you had to be Puritan in order to vote. Him and his friend, Reverend Samuel Stone, led a group of about 100 to find a new settlement of Hartford. Okay. Then they started the start of the Connecticut colony, actually. General Court represented the settlements, okay, and in 1638 it was written constitution. They framed a constitution and established a government for the Commonwealth. This is said to be the first constitution written in the New World, okay. Hooker died in the year 1647 at the age of 61. All right, go ahead. I posted the presentation. Make sure you do your show it. Take it slow. There's only 8 questions and it's all about the people, okay? If you have any questions, please let me know.